What do you do when the system designed to protect you completely fails you? Throughout history, ordinary people, farmers, fathers, businessmen, reached a breaking point. And when they did, they stopped waiting for justice. They went and got it themselves. Today, we're going over 3 of the most extreme cases of people who took the law into their own hands. And I promise you, each one is wilder than the last. It's 1812. A 12-year-old boy named John Brown has just driven a herd of cattle over 100 miles, completely alone, to deliver them to a U.S. Marshal. The Marshal is impressed. He invites John inside to rest for a few days before the long journey home. Inside the house, John spots another boy about his age, dressed in rags, moving quietly like someone used to being invisible. John, being John, rushes over and introduces himself. And slowly, the two become friends. But then comes dinner. John is called to sit at the table with the Marshal and his guests. His new friend, he serves them. And the Marshal beams with pride over John in front of everyone. The food is great. The laughter is loud. The guests leave happy. And then the door closes. The Marshal's face changes. He turns to the boy and starts screaming at him for every small mistake made during dinner. Then he walks to the fireplace and picks up an iron shovel. What John witnesses next, the sound of that shovel, the smell of blood, would burn into his mind for the rest of his life. That night, John Brown silently made a vow. He would wage an eternal war against slavery, whatever it took. Fast forward to 1854. Congress passes the Kansas-Nebraska Act, opening new territories to a popular vote on slavery. Both sides flood into Kansas, including 5 of John's own sons. By October 1855, John can't stay away. He loads a wagon with rifles, pistols, and swords and heads west. Then, on May 21, 1856, pro-slavery forces sack the anti-slavery town of Lawrence, Kansas. The very next day, a pro-slavery congressman beats an anti-slavery senator unconscious with a cane on the Senate floor. Something snaps inside the 55-year-old John Brown. He had spent decades hoping people would change. Now, he knew they wouldn't. So on the night of May 24th, he and his sons drag 3 pro-slavery settlers into the darkness and execute them. Kansas erupts. A state-level civil war begins. John Brown becomes public enemy number 1 in the South and a folk hero in the North. In August 1859, John meets his old friend, escaped slave and activist Frederick Douglass, in secret. He tells Douglass his plan: raid the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, seize over 100,000 rifles, and ignite a slave uprising across the entire South. Douglass begs him not to. "It's a suicide mission, John." Brown just smiles. "Come with me, Douglass. I will defend you with my life." On October 16th, 1859, John Brown and 18 men cut the telegraph lines into Harper's Ferry and seize the arsenal. Everything goes perfectly. Then they wait for the slaves to come. They never do. Instead, local militias surround them. By the time President Buchanan sends in the Marines, led by a colonel named Robert E. Lee, it's over. Brown is wounded and captured. 8 of his men are dead. At his trial, John Brown stands up and delivers one of the most defiant speeches in American history. He says if he had done the same thing for rich men instead of enslaved people, he'd be celebrated, not condemned. He is hanged on December 2nd, 1859. Within a year, the American Civil War had begun. 750,000 people would die, and Union soldiers marched into battle singing a song called John Brown's Body, which you might know today as Glory, Glory, Hallelujah. John Brown didn't start the war, but he lit the fuse. It's 1983 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Gary Poche is driving his 10-year-old son Jody to karate practice. His instructor, a 24-year-old named Jeffrey Doucette, is talented, friendly, and clearly struggling. He's basically living out of the dojo. So Gary, being a decent guy, starts inviting Jeff over for dinner. Lets him crash at the house sometimes. Jeff becomes like family. To Jody, he's the cool older friend he never had. To Gary, he's a trusted role model for his son. That trust was about to be shattered. On Valentine's Day 1984, Jeff asks to borrow Gary's wife's car to visit his uncle and asks if Jody can tag along. She says yes. He calls that night. They're staying over. Back tomorrow. Tomorrow comes. No sign of either of them. The police launch a nationwide search. Gary can barely function. Every terrible possibility loops in his head. Then, on February 29th, 2 weeks later, a collect call comes in from a motel in Anaheim, California. It's Jody. He's alive. Gary holds his son as he steps off the plane back home. Relief. Pure relief. Then the medical examination results come back. Jeff had been molesting Jody for over a year. Jody had been too scared to say anything. He didn't want to lose his friend. When Gary hears this, his world collapses. The guilt, the rage, the image of the man he welcomed into his home, into his family. Something inside Gary Poche breaks. Jeff is charged with kidnapping and child molestation, held in California while Louisiana prepares to extradite him. Gary waits, he drinks, he stews. Then one night at the bar, a friend mentions, casually, that Jeffrey Doucette will be flown back to Louisiana on March 16th. American Airlines Flight 595. On March 16th, Gary walks into Baton Rouge Airport in a hat and sunglasses. He finds a payphone and calls his best friend. News cameras are set up everywhere, waiting to film Doucette's return. Around 9:30 p.m., police escort Jeff through the corridor. As they pass the payphones, Gary tells his friend on the line, "You're about to hear a shot." He drops the receiver, draws a revolver, and fires. Gary doesn't resist as the officers arrest him. Jeff dies the following day. The entire execution was filmed live by the news crews standing right there. Gary was charged with second-degree murder, but the judge gave him a suspended sentence, probation, and community service. He never spent a single day in prison. When asked later why he did it, Gary Poche gave one of the simplest answers in the history of crime. If somebody did it to your kid, you'd do it too. It's 1848, and a man named Sam Brannan has just pulled off one of the greatest marketing stunts in American history. He bought up every pickaxe, shovel, and gold pan in San Francisco, shipped them all to his store in Sacramento, then walked into the streets holding a glass bottle of gold dust and started screaming, "Gold! Gold on the American River." Within weeks, 75% of San Francisco's men had raced east toward the gold fields, stopping at Brannan's store on the way. In 9 weeks, he made $36,000, about $1.4 million today. He became the richest man in California. San Francisco ballooned from under 1,000 people to over 25,000 in 2 years, and with that boom came a wave of crime the tiny police force couldn't handle. The worst gang in the city were the Sydney Ducks, ex-convicts from Australia. They set buildings on fire to distract the police while they looted businesses. On May 4th, 1851, they burned down over 2,000 buildings, more than half the city. Sam Brannan had seen enough. On June 9th, 1851, he gathered the city's most respected businessmen and delivered a simple message. The police are useless. If we want this city back, we take it ourselves. The committee formed that night. The very next day, a Sydney Duck member stole a safe from a merchant. The committee tracked him down, held a public trial, and hanged him in the street. Word spread fast. Within weeks, the committee had grown to over 700 members. By 1855, San Francisco was worse than it had ever been. Except now, the criminals wore suits. Corrupt elites controlled every position of power. Murder rates skyrocketed. The police did nothing. A newspaper editor named James King of William started publicly naming the corrupt officials. On May 14th, 1856, Casey walked up to King on the street. "Are you armed? Draw and defend yourself." Then shot him in the chest before he could answer. King died 6 days later. 2 days after the funeral, 3,500 armed vigilantes dragged Casey and Cora out of jail and hanged them in front of the entire city. The Committee of Vigilance was back, and this time it was bigger, angrier, and far more organized. They raided government buildings, found rigged ballot boxes, forced officials to resign. When a California Supreme Court justice stabbed a vigilante, the committee took the justice prisoner. The federal government sent a man named William Tecumseh Sherman to stop them. He resigned after realizing his own militia wanted to fight for the committee, not against it. On August 11th, 1856, 8,000 armed vigilantes paraded through the streets of San Francisco with cannons and floats to mark their disbandment. Their political party, the People's Party, ran the city until 1867. As for Sam Brannan, the man who started it all, the Mormon Church excommunicated him. His wife divorced him, and he died penniless. John Brown, Gary Poach, the Committee of Vigilance. 3 completely different people, separated by centuries, with one thing in common. They all reached a point where waiting for justice felt worse than going to get it. Now, I'm not saying they were all right. John Brown killed innocent people on his way to ending slavery. The vigilantes operated outside every law that exists, and Gary Poach committed murder in an airport on live television. But every single one of them looked at the world around them, decided the system had failed, and acted. Whether that makes them heroes or criminals, I'll let you decide. If you made it this far, thank you. Genuinely. Drop a comment below telling me which story hit hardest. I read every single one. And if you're new here, this is the channel. We tell real stories from history that most people have never heard. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.